I used to believe that love was something you could build, brick by brick, if you worked hard enough. I believed patience could fix anything and loyalty would always be rewarded. That belief is what led me to Daniel and what nearly erased me. When I met him, Daniel was magnetic. He had a way of speaking that made people listen, a confidence that felt like safety. He didn't just enter rooms, he claimed them. And when he chose me, I felt chosen in a way I never had before. He told me I was different, smarter, stronger, the one person who truly understood him. I was 26, independent, proud of the life I had built on my own. I had a career I loved, friends who felt like family, and dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon. Daniel admired that about me, or at least, he said he did. He told me we would grow together. That marriage wouldn't cage us, but expand us. Our love story moved fast, fueled by passion and promises. He proposed with certainty, like there was never another possible ending for us. Everyone said we were perfect, two driven people, two bright futures merging into one. I mistook his intensity for devotion. The changes didn't come suddenly. They slipped in quietly, wearing the disguise of care. At first, it was small suggestions. Are you sure that job isn't exhausting you? I worry you're pushing yourself too hard. You deserve a break. When Daniel suggested I let him manage the finances, I agreed. He was better with numbers, he said. When he questioned my long hours at work, I reassured him and then slowly cut them back. Love, I thought, meant meeting each other halfway. Then his career demanded more space, a promotion. A transfer to another city. He framed it as our opportunity, even as I handed in my resignation letter. He held my face in his hands and promised, "This is temporary. Once things settle, you can start again." I trusted him. In the new city, my days grew quiet. While Daniel thrived, I waited. I kept the house perfect, learned his routines, memorized his moods. I became the calm place he returned to after conquering the world. When I talked about finding work again, he always had a reason it wasn't the right time. Why rush? We're comfortable. You don't need to prove anything. Slowly, we became him. Daniel liked being the provider, the decision maker, the center of gravity. What he called protection was really control. He chose where we went, who we saw, how money was spent. If I questioned him, he smiled like I was being adorable. If I pushed harder, he accused me of being emotional. Arguments ended with me apologizing not because I was wrong, but because I was tired. I started to feel smaller in my own life. My world shrank to the edges of his success. Friends faded, opportunities passed. I told myself this was adulthood. This was marriage, that no relationship was perfect. The moment that stays with me happened at a dinner party. Someone asked what I did, and before I could answer, Daniel laughed and said, "She doesn't work anymore. She takes care of things at home." The words were casual, harmless even, but I felt something inside me crack. I smiled because I had learned how. Later that night, lying beside him while he slept without a care, I stared into the dark and wondered when I had stopped being myself. When love had started to feel like disappearance, I ignored the warning. I chose comfort over instinct. I held onto the man I married, convinced he would come back to me. I didn't know yet that the man I loved was already gone, and the man he would become was waiting patiently in his place. The betrayal didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It arrived quietly, through distance, through late nights that stopped needing explanations, through a phone that never left Daniel's hand and a smile that no longer reached his eyes. I knew before I knew. Women always do. At first, I tried to save us. I asked questions gently, then desperately. I suggested counseling. I reminded him of the life we promised to build together. Daniel listened with polite detachment, as if I were talking about a past he'd already buried. When I finally confronted him with the truth messages I wasn't meant to see, a name that appeared too often, he didn't deny it. He sighed, "You've changed," he said calmly. "You're not the woman I married." Something inside me broke at how easily he rewrote our history. As if I hadn't shaped my life around his. As if my sacrifices were invisible. Within weeks, the house felt like a hotel. He slept in the guest room, his tone turned formal, distant. Then one afternoon, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands folded like he was closing a business deal. "I want a divorce." There was no hesitation in his voice, no regret, just certainty. The papers arrived before I had time to process the word. His lawyer was efficient, aggressive, and clearly briefed to make me feel small. Daniel had already planned everything. He wanted the house, the savings, and full control over the assets we had built together. When I protested, he leaned close and said something I will never forget. "You don't have anything without me." That was the moment fear set in, not the loud kind, but the heavy kind that settles in your chest. I had no income, no recent work history, no access to accounts in my own name. He had designed it that way, and now he was using it. Court came faster than I expected. The room was cold and impersonal, designed to strip emotion from pain. Daniel sat across from me in a tailored suit, calm and composed. He looked confident, untouchable. His lawyer spoke about my lack of contribution, about how Daniel had been the sole provider, the driving force behind everything we owned. I sat silently, hands folded in my lap. And then Daniel spoke. "I'll take everything from you." His voice carried clearly across the courtroom. There was no anger in it, no cruelty that could be easily condemned, just certainty, like a man stating a fact he believed was already written. People shifted in their seats. I felt eyes on me, waiting for me to react, cry, protest, collapse. I did none of those things. I lowered my gaze and let the silence stretch. I let him believe I was broken, let him believe I was afraid. Because at that moment, he needed to think he had won, but inside me, something else was happening. That threat burned away the last of my hesitation, the last hope that this could end gently. If he wanted to erase me, then I would stop trying to be merciful. I left the courthouse that day, shaking not with weakness, but with resolve. Daniel smiled as he walked past me. "You should start thinking about how you're going to survive," he said quietly. I watched him leave, surrounded by confidence and arrogance, completely unaware of what he had awakened. He thought the divorce was the end of me. He didn't know it was the beginning. For weeks after that first court appearance, I let the world believe I was unraveling. I canceled plans, avoided questions, and moved through my days like someone carrying invisible weight. Daniel didn't check on me. He didn't need to. In his mind, I was already defeated. That was his greatest mistake. In the quiet of my isolation, I began to remember who I used to be. The woman who solved problems. The woman who paid attention. The woman who listened when people talked, because she understood that power often hides in details. I started with the things Daniel assumed I'd forgotten: old emails, financial statements, the backups I'd saved without thinking much of it at the time, just instinct. I found records of accounts opened in his name during our marriage, money moved in patterns that didn't make sense, transfers labeled as business expenses that led somewhere else entirely. Then there were the conversations I replayed in my mind. Late night calls he took outside, the sudden business trips, the woman he claimed was just an employee. I followed the thread slowly, carefully, the way you dismantle a trap without setting it off. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a former colleague who had become a lawyer. I hadn't called out of pride before. Now, pride didn't matter. Survival did. She listened without interrupting. Then she said something that changed everything. "He doesn't sound untouchable. He sounds sloppy." For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. We worked quietly, strategically. I gathered evidence while Daniel grew more careless. He underestimated my patience, mistaking silence for surrender. He continued using shared resources, hiding money poorly, confident I was too broken to notice. Every document I found felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When court resumed, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel arrived with the same smug confidence, the same tailored suit. He didn't look at me, didn't need to. He still believed I was the woman he could speak over. My lawyer spoke instead. She asked questions that Daniel wasn't prepared for, about accounts he hadn't disclosed, about expenses that didn't align with company policy, about an employee receiving benefits far beyond her role. I watched the color drain from his face. His lawyer objected. The judge listened and then allowed the questions to continue. Daniel stammered, just slightly, enough to reveal the cracks. Session after session, the truth surfaced, not all at once, but steadily, like water eroding stone. His image of control began to fracture. The man who once spoke with certainty now paused before answering. He stopped meeting my eyes. I did, and in that space, something shifted. I wasn't the woman being evaluated anymore. I was the one watching him unravel. The final moment came when the judge asked Daniel why certain assets had been intentionally excluded from his disclosures. His silence was louder than any confession. Court was adjourned early that day. Outside, Daniel finally approached me. His voice was low, urgent. "What are you doing?" he asked, like I had violated some unspoken rule. I looked at him calmly. "I'm telling the truth." He searched my face, trying to find the woman he once controlled. She wasn't there. I walked away with my head high, heart steady, and the quiet knowledge that the balance had shifted. For the first time, Daniel was afraid. And for the first time, I was free from him even before the ruling was made. The morning of the final hearing arrived with a kind of quiet tension that made my chest tighten. I woke before dawn, dressed in a simple suit, hair pulled back, no makeup to hide my resolve. I didn't feel victorious yet. I felt prepared. Prepared to take back what had been stolen. Prepared to walk out with more than possessions. Prepared to reclaim myself. Daniel arrived late as usual. He strode into the courtroom with confidence, a practiced smile, the same posture he had perfected over years of feeling untouchable. He assumed, as he always did, that I would be timid, frightened, diminished. He assumed the woman in the courtroom today was the same woman who had sat silently when he promised to take everything from me. He was wrong. The session began, and my lawyer laid out the evidence with precision. Every account he had tried to hide, every unjust transfer, every misrepresented asset. It was all there. Daniel's face betrayed the first flicker of panic I had ever seen. The man who once commanded rooms now fumbled words, shifting under the weight of truths he hadn't expected to surface. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions. Daniel's lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to downplay the significance of each revelation, but it was too late. One by one, the pieces of his facade fell apart. His confident air evaporated with each document, each testimony, each undeniable fact. I watched quietly, a steady calm settling over me. For years, I had been dismissed, overlooked, erased. But today, I existed in full. Each revelation wasn't just a financial win. It was a reclamation of my own power. By the time the judge reviewed the settlement, Daniel's shoulders had slumped. There was no smirk, no charm, no smoldering arrogance, just exhaustion and disbelief. The ruling was precise, undeniable. I would keep the house, the savings, half of the business shares, and my legal fees would be covered by him. And the statement that burned the most into his memory, the one that cut him more than losing money, was the judge's final observation. "Your wife sacrificed her career to support yours," the judge said, looking Daniel squarely in the eyes. "Without her, the success you enjoy would not exist. Justice requires recognition of her contributions, her patience, and her loyalty." Daniel swallowed. He had no response. For once, he could not charm, cannot argue, cannot manipulate. The man who had threatened to take everything had nothing left but the bitter taste of his own hubris. I left the courtroom with my head held high. Outside, sunlight fell across the steps, warm and real. Reporters and strangers glanced my way, curious, impressed, unaware of the battles fought in quiet rooms, through whispers of evidence and patient strategy. I smiled, not because of the headlines or possessions, but because I had won my dignity back. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt my life. I found work that honored my skills, made friends who valued me as an equal, laughed freely, without hesitation, without apology. Daniel's business began to collapse under mismanagement. His social circle distanced themselves, and the man who thought he could erase me became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and social gatherings. Sometimes when I am alone, I remember his words in that courtroom, "I'll take everything from you." I remember the arrogance in his tone, the certainty that he had already won. And I smile because he didn't understand what I had been doing all along. I wasn't waiting to be saved. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was preparing to rise, to reclaim, to prove that no one, not even the man I once loved, could define my worth or dictate my life. He wanted to take everything, but in the end, everything I truly needed, my dignity, my freedom, my life was already mine. And I walked away with it, stronger, wiser, and finally, completely free.